Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
All right, chat. There is a Brianna Droid Gray video I want to watch because it has somebody who I respect on it, Ben Jealous. We're not going to try to maul that Brianna Joy Gray, even though she's just probably one of the most disappointing people to ever go online in the history of online content. But Ben Jealous is cool. So why won't the Democrats fight? Or why won't Biden fight for voting rights? Let's watch this and enjoy ourselves. Let's whistle while Rome burns, etc. What are you going to do? Run in there with one bucket? They've got all these, they've got these 21st century fire engines just sitting there. Oh, well.
I want to pivot before we run out of time here to the issue of voting rights, which is what you've been championing most strongly so far. I know you were down the street at the protest earlier this week on Wednesday for voting rights reform. I want you to remind everybody where we are with that and what you see as the real obstacle and who you see as the real obstacle to actually getting these voting rights bills passed.
Well, look, I've been arrested outside the White House now, I think 4 times in the last couple of months. There have been a lot of protests up on Capitol Hill about the need.
So if you don't know who this is, Chad, this is Ben Jealous, former Maryland president of the NAACP. He won the Democratic primary for Maryland governor against Republican Larry Hogan. And the centrist Democrats of Maryland flocked behind the Republican, Larry Hogan. And pretty much the National Democrats didn't really give a shit about the Maryland governor's race. For some reason, they didn't care that a Republican was going to take over Maryland, one of the bluest states in the country. I wonder why they didn't care. Well, it turned out that Democrats hate progressives more than Republicans. And so whenever there is a chance to elect a Republican over a progressive, the mainstream Democratic Party in Washington, D.C. is going to jump at that chance. They don't want any progressive governors. They don't want any progressives in office that might actually, make them have to do something. So Ben was, of course, stabbed in the back by the Democratic Party, and Larry Hogan was reelected. Ben Jealous was a Justice Dem, no corporate money. Exactly. Republicans aren't a threat. They love a weak, do-nothing Democratic Party. The real enemy is the left. Of course, everybody understands that that if Pete Buttigieg becomes president, nothing is going to change. You all understand that, right? If Pete Buttigieg got into office and he had 100, Kirsten Cinemas in the Senate, every single senator was a Kirsten Sinema. He wouldn't do shit. Nothing. That's the plan. For you to get really pissed off at Republicans and the fascists in power, and you run to vote for who? Joe Biden? The guy who made all the problems that led to Trump? Who promised that nothing would fundamentally change? And he's kept that promise. Promises made, promises kept. All right, let's keep going.
To pass voting rights legislation, I'm supportive of it. But there becomes a point when only the president of the United States can actually get the job done. Mm-hmm. We saw it on the infrastructure bill, and we're there with voting rights. These voting rights bills have to be passed by the end of the year, or we will see a massive onslaught of racially tinged, hyper-partisan redistricting, just like we did in 2010. And what that means is that the president of the United States has to call on the Senate to clear a path for an up or down vote on the voting rights bills for which we have a majority. Kamala Harris, I want to be clear, has done her job. She's got 51 senators, and that's not an easy thing to do as president of the Senate, when 2 of them are Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. But she's done that.
She's got 50.
Now Joe Biden has to do his job, and so our protests have been calling on the
Joe Biden's job being
his job is to call on the Senate to clear a path for an up or down vote. That means to either fix or nix the filibuster. Get the filibuster out of the way so we can have an up or down
Trey.
vote.
Thank you
It
for
is
the tier
absolutely a Jim Crow filibuster. And President Biden has said good things, but he has to.
I know you said they won't pass anything next year during campaign, but you explain why again? Because the Democrats don't like to exercise power, and they're going to allow whatever events that take place to be an excuse to do absolutely nothing. Furthermore, if they allow these districts to be drawn, passing this bill next year, if they let these districts all get through the final approval process and get enacted, then it won't matter. They'll lose the House. The Democrats, and a lot of, this is one thing that this is what you need to understand. This is what a liberal will say. If you're watching someone and they're like, what the Democrats need to work on is their messaging. I want your mind to laugh and point at that person and go liberal. Because the problem with the Democrats isn't their messaging. The problem with the Democrats is they're not doing anything to structurally make society better. And one of those things is the electoral system, voting rights, anti-gerrymandering, vote by mail, lowering the voting age to 16. That's what the Social Democrats in Germany are doing. They just took power from Angela Merkel. What do they want to do? Raising the minimum wage, legalizing marijuana, lowering the voting age to 16. How come they can do that basic level of incremental change? It's like we are voting for the Tories versus fascists. Some people, official Bose says, fixing gerrymander would fix it all. It's not that fixing gerrymandering would guarantee the Democrats would win all the time, but it would at least mean that they're not going to automatically lose. And you can't even get them to, and this is self-preservation with the Democrats. Self-preservation. They don't even have self-preservation. And that's the Joker moment. No other political party in the world is like the Democratic Party. I'll say that again. No other Democratic Party in the world is like the Democratic Party in that they don't have self-preservation. They won't do anything for their voters. Had a Live family member tell me that demographics was a better electoral strategy than improving people's lives. Well, look what happened in 2020. Hispanics voted for Trump at the highest rate going back to, I think it was 2000, voted for Republicans. And black people were voting, especially black men, were voting for Trump at a higher rate. You know where Biden lost the most votes compared to Hillary in Pennsylvania? Philadelphia. Philadelphia was where Trump made the most gains of any region in the state. The Democrats are losing people of color now because they're that incompetent. And people hate liberals.
That talk.
Vinny wants me to show this to you, chat. Let's get the gritty turns in the chat. I prefer the real champion of the workers. I said the real champion of the workers. Perfection. Go ahead and get the gritty turns in the chat. Let's keep going.
Martin Luther King III was with us getting arrested 2 protests ago.
He's been on this podcast.
Yeah. Oh, he's a sweet guy, good guy, very clear thinking guy. And like his dad, a bit soft spoken, when it's one-on-one. And Martin said, reminded people that his father, when the 1964 Voting Rights Act was passed, went to President Johnson and said, great, now let's pass the Voting Rights Act. President Johnson said, I agree that we need it, but I have nothing left. I can't help you. And when Martin Luther King Jr. walked out, as his son recalled the other day at this protest, said, well, we're just going to have to make him do it. So we're in the just make Joe do it mode.
Okay,
and
here's the thing. We're talking about...
the difference is Lyndon Johnson actually had... All right. Let's not make this too... okay, chat, listen. Here's the pop quiz. This is how I know if you're a real Mike from PA fan. What was Lyndon Johnson's nickname for his penis? Anatherion, of course, got it right off the bat. Jumbo. Okay? Joe Biden is not going around swinging anything at Joe Manchin or anyone else. He's sitting on his ass going, there's 50 Democratic presidents. Lyndon Johnson was like, how do I get these bills passed? What do I need to do? What do I need to threaten? What do I need to promise? How do I need to cajole? How do I need to blackmail? That's how Lincoln got the anti-slavery amendment passed. Joe Biden sits on his ass eating ice cream all day with his brain slowly rotting. LBJ was the last lib president to actually do something. Carter was a pussy, and everything since has just been neo-lib garbage. That's correct. He was the last liberal president. Actual liberal, not neo-lib. He was the last Democrat of the New Deal coalition. It was LBJ. Now, it's just nothing but neoliberal weenies.
LBJ facing, I don't think that LBJ was saying, "Oh, I have the votes and I just don't want to get rid of the filibuster."
Yep.
He's saying there's a political reality that has to change such that the pressure, it's clear to everyone that the consequences of not doing this thing are worse than the consequences of doing it. And so I have the political cover to do the thing you want me to do. Right now, that's not the issue. You're telling me that you have 51 votes to actually pass this thing. And Joe Biden, through sheer obstinacy or I don't know what, is deciding this isn't just about passing a bill. This is about voting rights legislation that could be the last
And Questo, they gave you the tier 1.
Possible saving grace for a Democratic Party that is failing miserably electorally across the country. So it's to his own benefit and to his own party's benefit to pass this legislation. And for some reason, we're in the posture of begging him to save his own neck.
You're absolutely right that it's good politics for Joe. It's not just good policy, but it's actually the basic American principle. And yes, we're demanding it, which is what the civil rights movement does. We have seen him move, not quite far enough, but it's about 80% of the way.
What's the movement?
August, CNN town hall, he was like, you just can't stop people from voting. By 2 weeks ago at CNN town hall, he said, we may have to create a carve out in the filibuster or reform the filibuster in order to get the vote that we need. That's very good. Now we're going to keep the pressure on him because we only got, 6 weeks or something before the end of the year. And these bills got to get passed now.
So what do you understand? Because to convince someone's mind, to change someone's mind, I imagine you'd have to have some understanding or at least some prediction of what's going on inside, what's motivating them. Given that it's not just good policy, it's good politics for Joe Biden. Given that
why all the Brianna Joy Gray hate? Because the reason why is she's extremely cynical and also she's extremely out of touch. And that is a very gross combo. And she's kind of, she's gotten all the advantages that you could have, and she squandered it by like becoming a Jimmy Dore style dipshit. And spent most of her time trying to punch the people on the left flank of the Democratic Party, smearing them, trashing them, and all in all being garbage. And really was one of those people that helped kickstart the breakup of the Bernie coalition, at least online. And so when I saw that, I was really disgusted by it. She was the progenitor of the force the vote, pathetic loser move. By the way, how's that working out? They forced votes on things and they voted them down. And then what happened? Nothing. She also tried to make a quick buck off Bernie, and Bernie distanced himself from her immediately after she learned she was going around name-dropping him. But she's been name-dropping him while also trashing all of his allies. You know what I mean? Like, trash Bernie's allies in Congress for doing the things Bernie wants him to do. He's obviously not going to talk to you anymore. So, I'm listening to the guest.
What do you think is motivating his reluctance to do this very obvious thing that he should do? He has described it as the Jim Crow.
By the way, I have no problem with what she's doing now, and I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. Like I don't give a shit about this stuff as long as people move on and learn their lesson. But once you see when someone kind of shows you who they are, you should believe them. Kind of like a thing, you know what I mean? The Democrats need a major W. If it's not this, I don't know what they're going to do in this upcoming next election cycle. They have no W's. They have no fucking W. No W.
Filibuster is a Jim Crow relic.
Yes. So I would say one is just the distraction of being president, right? Everybody's clamoring for everything. Now, this is a democracy and voting rights kind of central. So then the second thing I would say is, I think like a lot of politicians, he wants to be the second coming of FDR, right? FDR is still the most popular president.
He's not doing a very good job.
And no, I mean, we can get into that. You ever want to have me back after this last round around? But
well, he's not FDR. I mean, that's off the table. I mean, FDR passed literally 16 major pieces of legislation and was doing all sorts of stuff left and right, controlling prices and setting up government-owned enterprise. And yeah, there's no comparison whatsoever. Biden is Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge was popular. He's not Calvin Coolidge.
No, and so FDR, what is he known for? Dealing effectively with entanglements overseas while rebuilding the American economy. And that seems to be Joe's comfort zone. When he's actually called to be like the best version of LBJ, which is he did those two things, and he passed voting rights and civil rights and dealt with it. So he has to deal with all three. Joe has to, frankly, deal with all three. Well, the reason why LBJ, who I think also wanted to be like FDR, was forced to deal with all three was that the movement wouldn't let him do anything but. And so we have to lean in. That's why I'm so appreciative of all the groups that are keeping pressure on the president right now. We have People for the American Way, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, Black Women's Roundtable, like all, Color of Change, Stand Up America, like just all these groups, Indivisible, Our Revolution.
Do you think people overlook Henry Wallace's contributions to FDR's presidency? Well, of course.
Absolutely keep the pressure on.
Do you think there's a role for threatening to withhold one's vote from Democrats if they continue to pussyfoot around the way that Joe Biden is doing, not just around voting rights reform, but his reneging on his promise to pass George Floyd Act reforms by the anniversary of George Floyd's
Dorsey resigned
murder,
as Twitter CEO,
canceling student debt, any number of promises that he's reneged on. It seems like if even millions of people in the street last summer couldn't get him to fulfill many of his campaign promises, at what point do you think these stakes have to be ratcheted up by activists who are protesting and have signs and are pressuring him? But it doesn't seem to be having an effect.
Give me the Dorsey.
I think it's the wrong use of privilege to simply say what you won't do. I think you got to use all your privilege and actually decide what you're going to do. And
well, I'm going to vote for a third party candidate,
or I'm going to primary, right? Or I'm going to support somebody who's going to primary.
Oh my God. I get it. I do. I get it. But come on, man. Every single topic doesn't have to go down this stupid rabbit hole of stupidity. Every time, man. Every time. All right, we're going to talk about this after this is done.
So, that's what I would say. I can never encourage anybody not to vote. What I would say is if you don't like, do what I did. Like, I looked at who was running for governor here in Maryland, and I decided to throw my hat in because I couldn't find anybody I was excited about, and I started off in fourth place. And in the primary, I ended up in first by a lot. But, a lot of people laughed when I ran. They were like, what is this kind of like, talking head on TV, Negro Bernie bro dude running for governor of our state? What? And so that's what I would say is like Brianna or any of the other kind of, young activists, like run, and find somebody to back to run, push Cori Bush to run, whatever. Well, AOC, whoever anybody wants. It's better to.
Well, no, see, he can't. Yeah. See, here's the problem is once you actually name someone, when you actually name someone to run, the grifters have spent their entire time trashing everybody. There's no one to run. That's the problem with a Brianna Joy Gray. That's the problem with a Jimmy Dore. That's a problem with those type of people, is they've spent their time shitting on AOC, on Cori Bush, and Ilhan Omar and everyone else for some imagined slight that when you're like, okay, let's do a third party, who's going to be in it? Well, there's no one to join it because they've tried to trash everybody personally over some minor strategic disagreement. And that's why they're unlikable.
Have someone to vote for than them to simply not.
So do you think that one of the progressives should primary Joe Biden if he doesn't follow through on his campaign promises?
That's why we have a primary.
What do you think would be their fate?
Yes.
I don't know. I
Black
mean, I got to
Jesus,
tell you,
right.
In my primary here, I had two county executives of two of the very largest counties in Maryland. And it was just the only question in the media was which one of them was going to, be the Democratic nominee. I was in fourth as a civil rights activist. I ended up in first by a lot. So
Tulsi is now
you just
a Republican.
Go do it. You just got to go do it. It was not
Gary.
a rational
Tulsi's
decision,
a Republican now,
Brianna,
man.
when I ran for governor. Any political expert would have told you I was on a fool's errand. Setting aside that we were up against anybody was going to be up against an incumbent. Andrew and Stacey, two old friends and people who I'd organized with when we were young, were up for open seats. We were up against the second most popular incumbent here in the country, and we knew that was going to be tough. But getting through the primary was the first thing, and it was considered a fool's errand. And again, it just what it affirms for me is that nobody really knows who should run until they're running. And then even then, it takes a long time before you get traction. And one of the things we do at People for the American Way with our Frontline Leaders Academy is we train young people to run. And then once they're in office with our Young Elected Officials Network that Andrew Gillum created here 17 years ago, Stacey Abrams went through that program. Pete Buttigieg went through that program. Julian Castro went through that program.
This is not.
But what I'm saying is all these people started off as like activists and people that folks weren't actually thinking as a young Black woman, as a young Chicano man, as a young gay white man, think 20 years ago, were like shoo-ins to be the powerhouses that they are now.
People who listen to this podcast, I got to be honest, aren't big fans of most, if not all, of that list. And the reason is because I just want to say this though. The reason is because that they have in many ways fallen back and are identified solely as a young Chicano man, a young gay man, a young Black woman. And the principles, the veneer of progressivism that made people excited about them to begin with seems to have faded away with their association with Mayor Bloomberg's mayor camp and a lot of these institutions that have them out there in the world as a kind of younger, diverse troupe of neoliberals. And so I'm curious about you. I mean, you're someone who, I had a lot of fondness for and affinity for and appreciated your robust support of Bernie Sanders, especially back in 2016 when people weren't doing that. And I was really looking forward to your run, your gubernatorial run. But it did seem to me that you weren't really running so much as a Bernie bro. And I understand that it's Maryland and I understand that it's a different kind of environment. But I was covering...
That's wrong. He definitely did. He's just wrong on this. But go on.
2018 races at the
this is exact. By the way, this is how you know she's a fraud. Because whenever somebody runs as a Bernie Sanders allied person and they lose, which guess what? Welcome to the real world. Being good and being right doesn't mean you win. Man, I hate people like this. Who pretend to be cynical but are the most naive babies. Just having good politics doesn't mean you win. Just being right doesn't mean you win. Have you ever had a job? Have you ever done anything? He absolutely ran as a progressive left-wing candidate. He ran on single-payer healthcare in Maryland. This is just like, he's just wrong, man. He's just wrong. What happened is he got backstabbed by liberals. And the mainstream media said, well, Larry Hogan is the good type of Republican, the moderate type of Republican, the type of Republican we need to elect to have a strong Republican Party. And a bunch of Democrats voted for him. That's what happened. And if you go to Larry Hogan and go, well, you didn't run as a Bernie bro, you're going to lose and lose and lose. And here's what's going to happen is every time somebody runs as like a Bernie bro and loses, Brianna Joy Gray is going to go, that person didn't really run as a Bernie bro. And when they do win, if they don't do exactly what Brianna Joy Gray does, they're a sellout. Once says they're a sellout. That's why I don't like her.
Intercept at the time. And I remember rooting for you, but also feeling like the left energy that might have been behind the campaign, and maybe you didn't feel like it was needed, wasn't going to be galvanized by the way in which the campaign was manifesting. And I wonder,
this is just literally made up bullshit. I'm actually pissed off that Ben has to sit here and listen to this crap, because there's a belief in this, some sort of manifest left energy that just exists. And if only you tapped into it, you would win. When it's like, actually, nope. The American people are disorganized. They have no class consciousness. The left is weak. Organized labor is on its back foot. It's in the corner with and it's wobbling. But she's so far from reality, because if you actually look at reality, it's tough. That means we've got a lot of work to do. That means we've got to do a lot of little shit, and it's going to be years of effort before we can actually achieve a victory. You don't want to look at that, because that is painful. That is hard to take. That's hard to take, that the right is 10 times more organized than us. It's hard to take that the world's most powerful, richest people see us as a threat, are organized against us, are going to use intelligence services of the nation's most powerful, or the world's most powerful nations, going to use these big corporate mercenary groups that are going to supervise, that are going to spend billions of dollars on think tanks and politicians and super PACs. They're going to use local police forces. Yeah, it's fucking scary. It sucks that you're facing off against the world's most powerful people using the most dangerous brutality. But that's where you're actually at. If you're a Harvard-educated lawyer making hundreds of thousands of dollars in your podcast, it's easy to sit back and enjoy the status quo, because you're doing quite well in our society. So if you just tell your viewers, pay me that $5 a month, and if only somebody, the politicians are failing us, is the easiest lie, because it has a veneer of truth. Obviously, the politicians are failing us. Why? Because they aren't our politicians. Because we don't have any. Because we don't have the movements that are strong enough. And I hate to say that, because a lot of people will feel despair. Oh, they'll go watch her and say, Mike's an asshole, Mike's wrong. Mike's makes me feel bad sometimes. Mike is a jerk. I'm going to go watch the people that lie to me, make me feel good about myself. And I'm not saying this to be a pessimist, because we watch the real shit. We just watched the UAW reject those contracts and get a better one. We just watched the Teamsters elect actual militant leadership for the first time in 50 fucking years. We follow real shit that's happening. But goddamn, this is so annoying to watch, man.
what you make of why you ultimately lost in that effort. And I also was curious whether you had any insights from that.
Notice that her account of his defeat is absolute bullshit. The idea that he won because he didn't run far, he lost because he didn't run hard enough to the left is absolute horseshit. If only he had said if his platform had been slightly different, suddenly people would have risen up. If his webpage had some more lines on it, is some horse shit that I can't even explain to you is so stupid. Because by the way, if it was that simple, we would have already won.
True. About what just went down in Virginia.
I mean, we were the only campaign in the country that ran for state-based Medicare for all.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, he didn't. Oh, wait, he was the. Wait a minute. What was that? What was that? What I just said? He was the Medicare. He was a single payer in a. Wait, what? Oh, what? I guess he didn't go far enough left. The only one.
Which is like a massive idea if you actually try.
Isn't that? Wait a minute. Didn't Home Slice in Michigan, who also lost, whose name I'm now blocking?
Oh,
he lost the primary.
Al-Said.
He lost the primary. Al-Said lost the primary. There was plenty of people who lost the primary who ran on Medicare for All. Congratulations. Biss ran for Medicare for All too. He lost in Illinois. And primaries are harder to get through than general elections for small scale elections. Not necessarily true, my dude. And guess who won his primary? He did.
Was he state or federal?
It was state. There was a Michigan state. Okay. Yeah, because what's her name who went to work for the Warren campaign?
That would make sense. He was my fellow Bernie bro, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say that we did run a very Bernie bro campaign, because what that means is that you go kick the beehive of the entire pharmaceutical lobby, the beehive of the whole
God, see how he's actually talking about reality? You see how he's actually talking? I'm sorry for pausing so much. I didn't intend to pause this much. But Brianna's analysis of politics is so piss poor. I can't believe people watch this shit. How does she get these guests? I mean, I guess being Bernie Sanders' national press secretary did get you a number of relationships, right? But holy shit balls, this is terrible.
Whole for-profit medicine machine. I think if you ask, we also ran,
Very jealous of
on
that.
harm
That's right.
reduction. We ran on, a whole bunch of kind of like hardcore harm reduction. We ran on ending mass incarceration and using the savings to fund our public universities. We ran on free community college. I mean, I think if you go right down the line, it couldn't have been, more of an extension of the campaign. Now, of the presidential that had just happened, of the Bernie campaign. What it came down to in the end was that 75% of the voters in Maryland knew who I was, and 100% knew who the sitting governor was. And that is a function of your advertising budget at the very end.
Lefties are willing to get to some campaign.
Oh my goodness, he started talking about real shit, and then now we're cutting away from him to whoops-a-daisy. He's starting to talk about politics and reality and rooted in reality. Let's cut away.
I don't know if you remember, but Bernie Sanders raised more money in this last presidential race than anybody else.
Sure,
Race,
I mean, Bernie
But that's not every. This is the other baby brain shit. Because Bernie Sanders and AOC raise a bunch of money because they're national media stars, that means if you just run as a left-wing candidate, you're going to get a bunch of money, is horseshit. It's absolute horseshit. All right? The way people get money is if they get recognized nationally. Then you can earn small dollar donors very easily. But if you're just some nobody who's running for state representative against a Republican in a swing seat and you're a leftist, the party's going to say you're too far left, won't endorse you, won't give you any money, and you're not going to get national media attention. And then you're going to get buried 20-1 by the Republican and corporate money. Oh, is this a little bit of truth for you, Brianna Joy Gray? That's how our system actually works. And nobody will know your name. And in fact, the only thing they're going to know about you is whatever lie the Republican could come up with. And they're going to smear you. Did you know that Luna didn't pay her student loan bill? You can't trust her with her own finances. How could you trust her with our state's finances? She'll raise your taxes and waste our money. On every ad. She's going to hurt our children. Yeah, you're really going to win. I legitimately don't get her point, though. AOC and Bernie made lots of money, but they were still hated by the establishment. Of course, raising money doesn't matter. It's not about the actual money. It's about class. It's about the people at the top of our hierarchy wanting to keep their position and wanting to keep the deal the way it is. And they don't want to have concessions extracted. So they're going to go for the candidates like Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden that nothing will fundamentally change. And once you're recognized as one of those people that wants real change, they're going to come after you. How do you beat that? Well, we've won in the past, and there are ways that we have won, but it's about time you start to recognize that running as a progressive is the hard choice. If you people don't know that, they're going to run. They're going to be naive idiots and get destroyed. And then after they get destroyed, they're going to become cynical. They're going to become crazy. They're going to go down the Jimmy Dore path of stupidity and meaningless bitterness, learn nothing, and build towards nothing. How many times have you seen promising leftist candidates lose and then they turn crazy? They turn crazy because they went into the campaign not understanding reality and not being told the truth. They thought it would be, well, I just run on good policies that everybody supports and I'll just win. I'm a good person. If it was that easy, politics wouldn't be the way it is. Plus, she totally ignored that Bernie was on the precipice of winning the primary, but he was sabotaged by a collective DNC effort to defeat him. Same thing with Ben.
We raised, I had more donors than like anybody, ever who would run as a Democrat in Maryland. We had a lower average campaign, average donation. And yet Maryland doesn't excite people. It's not like, like from around the country. It's just like a regular state. They think of it as being kind of a blue state. We would focus group folks trying to figure out how to, build it. But the bottom line is that I would say we fell about $10 million short from an advertising perspective of what we needed to penetrate the bottom 25%. What we knew, and you can go back and you can look at the Republican, and I kind of go into this detail, how anybody's thinking about running, is that the Republican was afraid of our message because he kept putting out these kind of like soft pedal versions. So I would say, like, I'm for free community college. And then the governor would announce like his own spin on free community college. Or, I would say, I'm for 20% raise for teachers. And then the governor would run an ad saying, I'm for higher salaries for teachers too. And he was talking about a 1% COLA. But he would never try to give anybody a reason to figure out who the other guy was in his advertising. And what we knew is that for every 100 voters in that final stretch who learned of our campaign, we won 55 of them to 45. But we did not have the dollars in the final stretch to get to 100% name ID. Generally, in the gubernatorial race, if you can get to 75%, you're where you need to be. But when you're up against a popular incumbent, it's just a different kettle of fish.
We could have a whole conversation about what happened to Maryland and the lessons learned. I mean, I am curious what you're making.
We could have a whole conversation. We won't, because Brianna didn't even follow the race. This is so embarrassing, man. So embarrassing, man. Okay.
What your take is on McAuliffe's loss.
I mean, right away, what you saw in Virginia was there was just not much enthusiasm for a former governor running for governor again. They have a one-term limit in Virginia. And right away, when he announced, he was trailing Biden by like 10 points.
So why would the Democratic Party do that? If that was obviously true from the get-go, why would the Democratic Party set itself up like that?
We supported Ms. Floyd, People for the American Way. We were all behind Ms. Floyd, who young Black woman, state legislator, I think first Black female grad of the Virginia Military Institute, progressive, endorsed by the unions and our revolution and all of that. And she would have brought a lot more energy. Absolutely. But the big money in the primary, the same money that, for instance, had supported Martin O'Malley but wouldn't support me, here in the state. The developers who I, generally, characterize as corrupt, because they are in Maryland.
They are trying to write. They are everywhere. They are everywhere. America is actually a kind of semi-feudal society. Is that there is a number of families. I don't know. You'll have to look it up what families they are in your town. But there's a number of families in every town who have connections to the local politicians. They get the TIFs. They get the opportunity zone money. They get tipped off behind the scenes when the city or state is going to invest in some sort of infrastructure or some sort of like public building, so they can buy up lots ahead of time and make a quick buck, selling it back to the city. And this is where a lot of the like sort of hidden billionaires are in America. Is there's a lot of these type of real estate developers, and they trade off of their ability to get property rezoned. Right? They'll buy agricultural land. They have connections with the planning board. They get a variance that agricultural land suddenly becomes suburban development. So when it's agricultural land, that land is not worth very much. When you could put a fucking suburban development on it and parcel it out and subdivide it, suddenly it's worth 10 times as much. They just 10x'd their money by doing nothing but having a relationship with the planning board. That's the kind of stuff that actually makes people rich in America. Have you read that article by Patrick Wyman about American gentry? No, but sounds like somebody who's agreeing with me, so that sounds good. I know this from firsthand experience. All right, let's keep watching this.
Checks. That class of donor lined up behind Terry because he was good for business for them. And that's just a rational decision that business people make. I get it. I didn't benefit from it because we ran such a progressive campaign, because we were so focused on actually opening up government to everybody in the state and getting beyond old patterns of nepotism and corruption. And Ms. Foy ran into a similar thing. But she couldn't even get out of the primary. Now, if we had had a young Black woman running, enthusiasm would have been much higher. And if you
would say if you had a young Black progressive woman with a good populist policy base running, it would generate enthusiasm.
Yeah, and she was all of that. She was all of that. And yet they've got to have the money, at the end of the day, to reach the voters who aren't reading the paper, aren't watching the news, are kind of unplugged, focused on their own lives. And again, what we found is that's about a quarter of the electorate in Maryland. And to get to them takes a whole lot of money. And Youngkin, money was never an obstacle for Youngkin. He's a very rich man who was willing to pour his resources into it in a very aggressive way. And, ran an insurgent campaign that was well-funded. And so, that at the end of the day, trust me, I had words with the Democratic Governors Association. And I'll tell you, Brianna, the point that the establishment.
See, we need more Ben Jealouses in positions of authority and less Brianna Joy Grays. We need more people like this talking to people so that you can talk about reality and politics. And what's so frustrating to me is that money is not the only thing. It isn't. It's also, there's all this kind of intangibles, which is hard to explain, but let me give it a shot. Like social proof, like validation. And when you run as a progressive, other Democrats run away from you that are establishment corporate Democrats. And they don't endorse you, and they don't get behind you. And then that information is transmitted to a lot of people. And a lot of Democrats have been trained, it's okay to split your ticket for a reasonable Republican. Now, on the other side, Republicans are told Democrats want to kill your babies and are communists and are part of a globalist cabal that want to kill you. So no Republican goes, I can split my ticket for that moderate Democrat. That's not, like, Republican watching Republican media is not getting the message. You can occasionally split your ticket. But if you watch CNN, you watch MSNBC, you watch liberal media, they're like, there are some moderate Republicans. We've got to have a strong Republican Party. And they're getting that message. Like, I got to keep an eye out for those good Republicans, and we've got to promote them. The only people that split their tickets now are Democrats. And so, and the corporatists love that because that is their second ability to keep control of the Democratic Party. Because if a corporate Dem loses the primary, but a Republican wins the general, that primary loss is immaterial. It goes away. If you don't actually hold the positions of power, then no one gives a shit about you. So if they can sabotage the Democrat from losing, their institutional control of the Democratic Party's apparatus will help them in the next time around. They're thinking in decades. They're thinking in family generation terms. So they're willing to hurt the Democratic Party for their own personal gain. Not only should your candidate be an activist, but they also be an advocate, as with receipts. There's a difference between Nina Turner, has both. We need more people like her and Cori Bush, Linda and Ilhan Omar. Yeah.
If the establishment's really going to regret not investing in my race because they didn't want a progressive to be governor, it's going to be when Larry Hogan challenges Chris Van Hollen, which looks like it's about to happen. And right now, he would beat Chris Van Hollen by more than 20 points from the polls that we're seeing. You can just look at the Goucher poll that came out. And that's what I told them back then. I was like, I get it. I get it. You don't want to support a progressive to take out this sitting governor. You guys kind of like doing business to him. Understand he intends to be president.
Listen to
Understand
that.
he will take out
Listen
one of our
to
senators.
that. That's the Democrats don't want to challenge a Republican governor. And now that Republican governor is going to take all that good cred of bipartisanship. He's not a bipartisan. He's a fucking lunatic. And he's going to run and he's going to defeat a liberal senator. And the Republicans are going to he's going to vote for Mitch McConnell to be majority leader. What a pathetic loser party, man.
to get there. And right now, we are looking like we could be in for the most expensive Senate race in this next term here in Maryland. Nobody's even talking about it. But if you just go look at the polls in the state, you'll see why, and you look at Hogan's ambitions, why it almost seems like a foregone conclusion that he's going to declare. He doesn't have to declare early because he has a big war chest. He can just come right in, and he would start out with like a 20 to 25 point advantage over the Democratic income.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium.
Okay. Ugh. Why do they love Larry Hogan? Because he's a corporatist. So this is what happens in blue states. In a state like California, in a state like New York, the vast majority of people have very progressive economic and social politics, right? But there are still rich people. Well, the Democratic Party is supposed to represent the working class. It's supposed to represent organized labor. And so the rich people understand that the Republicans can't win. So they go into the Democratic Party and they corrupt it as much as they can. And they find their Pete Buttigiegs, they find their Kamala Harrises, and they try to corrupt things as thoroughly as possible. And then when they get the chance, those same people will then flip to a Republican. If a Republican has a shot of winning, they'll go to the Republican Party to try to balance out and defeat any kind of progressive movement from happening in the blue states. That's why the blue states suck. That's why do you have overwhelming homeless in LA? Do you think that we don't know how to build apartments? You don't think we know how to solve homelessness and housing? In the year of our Lord, 2021, we don't know how to keep people off the streets? Are you serious? The reason why there are homeless people in LA is because the moderate Democrats want it that way.